Harry's Wife, Part 101.84, Cornered and Misunderstood. The Times is serialising extracts from Valentine Low's new book, and, of course, this behooves the necessity of examining it to enable us to understand more about what's really going on, look at the evidence from other people with regard to their experiences of Harry and Harry's wife, and, of course, as always, to explain it through the prism of narcissism and its impact upon other people, because this is what this channel is about. Before Harry and Harry's wife returned from Canada in January 2020, where they spent Christmas with their baby son Archie, away from the rest of the family, Harry sent an email to his father saying that they were unhappy. The current setup was not working for them, and they wanted to go and live in North America. Harry seemed to be under the impression that they could just sort it out by email before he and Harry's wife got back to London on January the 6th. Shows the naivety and dim-wittedness of a gingerbollocks. The reply they got, however, was that this would require a proper family conversation. They were also told that the first date that the family would be available was January 29th. It is not clear if this inflexibility was on the part of Charles, quite possibly asserting control over his son and Harry's wife, who was due to be in Davos, or that this was the response of his long-time private secretary Clive Alderton pulling the strings. Either way, from the Sussex point of view, this went down incredibly badly. Naturally, they're not getting their way, and therefore it's a threat to Harry's wife's sense of control. It fed into the narrative that they were not being taken seriously by the palace machinery, or by the rest of the family. Harry had tried to speed up matters by arranging to see his grandmother alone before he left Canada. However, the message was conveyed to him that the Queen had been confused about her diary and was no longer available. Harry was incensed because it was not true. The courtiers had got in the way. It seemed because they saw the meeting with the Queen as an attempt to pick the Queen off before Harry started talks with the rest of the family. As one source put it, there was a danger that a private conversation could be interpreted very differently by two people. That was said to have made Harry so cross that for a while he considered driving straight from the airport to Sandringham to drop in on the Queen unannounced. Poor boundary recognition, his narcissistic traits of anger and resentment coming to the fore. He eventually dropped the idea, but it was a sign of his frustration that he even contemplated such a move. Given that the couple announced their plans to stand down on January the 8th, and the royal family met to discuss it all 5 days later, on January the 13th, the so-called Sandringham Summit, it seems that the family diary was rather more flexible than originally appeared. Harry and Harry's wife could be maddening, of course. They had already infuriated the royal family by pushing out their Megxit announcement on January the 8th with the minimum of notice, sense of entitlement, lack of emotional empathy, when all the talks had been about issuing a joint statement. But the palace also showed the sort of initial inflexibility that was always guaranteed to infuriate them. Harry and Harry's wife felt cornered, misunderstood, and deeply unhappy. If the rest of the institution failed to appreciate that, even if their demands were unreasonable, the departure of negotiations were never going to end happily. It is uncontroversial to suggest that the Sussexes would regard the talks as a failure. They wanted to find a compromise whereby they could live part of the year abroad but carry out some royal duties at home, also known as having your cake and eating it. No such compromise was found. Instead, they lost their royal duties, their patronages, Harry's military affiliations, their security, their income from the Prince of Wales, and, for official purposes anyway, their HRH titles. They pretty much lost everything, except for the freedom to do exactly what they want. And of course, that was the nature of the beast then. You're either in or you're out. And if you want to be out, then you lose all of these things. It's not difficult to get your head around, but it is, of course, for Harry's wife, because her sense of entitlement and narcissistic perspective tells her that You must do what I want, and I want to be allowed to go and merch myself by virtue of having got ginger bollocks by the ginger bollocks. But also, in order to do that, I still need all of these things that go with it. The title, the patronages, some royal duties, and, of course, some security, along with that income. Thank you very much, father-in-law. It shows the sense of entitlement, the lack of accountability for the behaviours, the poor boundary recognition, and absence of emotional empathy. The rest of the royal family, the article continues, lost a much-loved member of the family, and saw the creation of a rift that has resulted in the self-exiled Sussexes still throwing barbed criticisms across the Atlantic, smearing indirect assertion of control. It will take a long time for the institution to get over the accusations the couple made in their interview with Oprah Winfrey, including the implication that the royal family is racist. No one in the royal family on either side can have been happy that Harry did not attend the memorial service to his grandfather, the Duke of Edinburgh, in March 2022. In the immediate aftermath of the Sussex bombshell on January the 8th, when the Queen said she wanted all 4 households to work together at pace to find a workable solution, Edward Young, the Queen's private secretary, was with the Queen at Sandringham. The first negotiations took place in Clarence House, Charles's home ground, over the following 4 days, with the private secretaries and communication secretaries from the 4 households all trying to find a way to make the Sussex's dreams a reality. They gathered in Alderton's office, a sunny first-floor room where paintings from the royal collection sit alongside photographs of Alderton's own family. Young would join the talks on the phone from Norfolk, but for the first few days it was Alderton who was leading the discussions. Later, they would all have talks at Buckingham Palace. Simon Case, Prince William's private secretary, who is now cabinet secretary, also played a pivotal role. He was talking to both sides, said a source. The people sitting around the table went through 5 different scenarios, which ranged from Harry and Harry's wife spending most of their time being working members of the royal family, but having a month a year to do their own thing, to spending most of their time privately, but doing a select number of royal activities. There was, according to more than one source, a positive atmosphere in the room. They wanted to find a solution. At one stage, Alderton made the point that if they could get this right, they would be solving a problem for future generations of the royal family who were not in the direct line of succession. By the end of the week, the 5 scenarios had been worked through. The view from the palace establishment was that however much time Harry and Harry's wife spent away from royal duties, anything they did would reflect on the institution. That meant that the normal rules about royal behaviour would apply. They should not act or take decisions in order to gain financial or other material benefits for themselves, their family, or their friends. Naturally, you can see that that's going to offend with the sense of control and residual benefits. But the Sussexes wanted their freedom. Freedom to make money, residual benefit. Freedom to dip their toes into American politics, unshackled from control. There was no way for the 2 sides to reach an agreement on that point. Crucially, it was the Queen who took the view that unless the couple were prepared to abide by the restrictions that applied to working members of the royal family, they could not be allowed to carry out official duties. One source said, there was a very clear view. You can't be in and out. And if you've got such clarity of view, it's very difficult to say, why don't we go 10% this way instead of 20%? Compromise was off the table, removed by the Queen. Could Harry and Harry's wife's departure have been handled differently? Did the most senior courtiers in the institution, Alderton and Young, have a grasp of the situation soon enough? Were they unaware of how unhappy Harry and Harry's wife had become, and how bad things had become with their staff? Or were they burying their heads in the sand? Did they let a personal dislike of Harry's wife prevent them from seeing the very obvious dangers that lay ahead? One former insider has described how Young's predecessor, Christopher Gate, the Queen's long-serving former private secretary, who was effectively ousted by Prince Charles in 2017, used to walk the corridors to know what was going on. Did Young walk the corridors? One former palace insider believes the way the developing crisis was handled was incompetent beyond belief. They said, I think Harry's wife thought she was going to be the Beyoncé of the UK. See parts passing for analysis of that. Being part of the royal family would give her the kudos, whereas she discovered was that there were so many rules that were so ridiculous that she couldn't even do the things that she could do as a private individual, which is tough. It just required the decision makers to sit around a table and say, okay, what are we going to do about this? What do you need to feel better, and what can we give? There is, however, another view, that nothing could ever have saved the situation. The two sides were just too far apart. And of course, you have to bear in mind that what none of them in the room appreciated is that they were dealing with a narcissist, whose agenda is not actually that which is being stated, but is one in accordance with the prime aims. This is why mediations fail with narcissists, unless what you want happens to accord with that of what the narcissist wants. Most of the time, it does not. That's why negotiations invariably fail. Compromise discussions invariably fail, because there's usually an unaware narcissist who doesn't know that they're seeking fuel and control, character traits and residual benefits, and the other parties to the discussion who don't know that either. And therefore there is a hidden agenda. I've explained that in detail in a particular video, which explains why, when it comes to trying to resolve matters in such a way between a narcissist and a non-narcissist, it fails because the non-narcissist doesn't realize that there is a hidden agenda. And instead, when you understand that you're dealing with a narcissist, you go into such a negotiation with altered expectations. You either don't bother in the first place, saving yourself time, money, and aggravation, or you do so with a minimal expectation of success. That way, you're not going to be disappointed and frustrated. Another palace source, returning to the article, who has been critical of the Queen's private secretary Edward Young in the past, said, "I think that it was an impossible task. I think, in Harry's wife and the household, you had two worlds that had no experience of each other, had no way to relate to each other, had no way to comprehend each other. And Harry's wife was never going to fit in that model, and that model was never going to tolerate the Harry's wife who Harry's wife wanted to be. So I think it was inevitable that they would not be able to work together. I don't think there's anything Edward could have done about that other members of the royal family would have accepted." Both things are probably true. There was a collective failure on the part of those who worked for the royal family to recognise that there was a serious problem, to flag it up and to try to do something about it. There were no high-level discussions any time in the first 8 months of 2019, when Harry's wife was later to say that she had suicidal thoughts, revision of history, and the first clues were emerging that the Sussexes were plotting an escape, about their nature of their unhappiness and what could be done about it. But even if that had happened, I do not believe that it would have solved the problem. Their grievances were too deep-rooted, and the distance between what the Sussexes wanted and what the royal family felt able to give was just too great. Perhaps the best that could have happened is that the divorce could have been handled without all the acrimony that followed the events of January 2020. One thing is definitely true, however. If there are any failings, they were during the first year or so of Harry and Harry's wife's marriage. There is one final thought on this, and it comes from a surprising source. Someone who knows Harry well, but remains upset about what Harry and Harry's wife did. Their view is that perhaps the Sussexes' departure was not the untrammelled disaster that so many think it was. There is a part of me that thinks Harry's wife did Harry the greatest kindness anyone could do to him, which was to take him out of the royal family, because he was just desperately unhappy in the last couple of years in his working life. We knew he was unhappy, but we didn't know what the solution would be. She came along and found the solution. Well, that person's observation is somebody who doesn't understand a narcissist. Of course, Harry will have felt the salvation. Along comes the lady with the spicy poontang that takes him away from something that's making him unhappy. But you can be removed from something unhappy and be plunged into something which makes you even more unhappy, i.e., being in the sustained devaluation of a narcissist. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.